Well, an anniversary today, 20 years since the Republic referendum, of course, the one that failed, and ever since there's been plenty of gnashing of teeth. On one side at least, I suppose it's a joyous day. For those on the other, joining me now to discuss what's next for the movement, Peter Fitzsimons, of course, Chair of the Australian Republic Movement. Thanks very much for your time. I'm wondering, Peter, when you're looking at the landscape right now, there's concern about the economy, global security, North Korea, the trade war. Do you think the Republic starts to feel like a back burner issue in light of all that at the moment?
I think our issues of our national sovereignty are always going to be very important, and what we most need now in this country is unity and to have bipartisan support on something of saying we can run our own show, we can do this, we can find a better system than finding our head of state from a family of aristocrats living in a palace in London would help bring us all together. And I make the point that when we look at our national parliament, we've got a higher proportion of Republicans in the upper and lower house than ever before. We're batting 58%, and we've got twice as many Liberals on our side as we do as the monarchists have on their side. So the monarchists have a certain number of Liberals. We've got double that number, 58%. It'd be great to have the Prime Minister on board, but we're working on that.
You're working on it, but do you have any realistic hope? I mean, given what Scott Morrison's been saying and his priorities are, throw in the, of course, now required Quiet Australian line there. He's not going to budge, is he?
Well, one word we heard from the Liberals is that they do want, going into the next election, to have some part of a progressive agenda. If their whole thing is stop, 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 well, not this, not that, they would stand to be steamrolled as history moves forward. There's no doubt that Australia is moving towards a republic. That will happen. The cards that are in the air at the moment, the obvious one right now is Brexit. Now, personally, if I was in Great Britain, I would be campaigning strongly against Brexit. I think it's madness, but I can't help but note, as chair of the ARM, that if Brexit goes through and the likes of Scotland and Northern Ireland were to leave Great Britain and Great Britain were to become Little Britain, it would be even more ludicrous than it is now for Australia to be clinging around the ankles of Little Britain saying, we want to hold on to you too. They'll leave you, but we'll hold on. Come on, we're better than that. The other one is that wherever I speak in the country on the issue, the number of people that say to me, I'll be with you once Her Majesty passes away, but I won't be with you till then. My point in return is that our sovereignty is far more important than the health of Her Majesty or anybody in the royal family. I also make the point, those who say that they won't support Prince Charles becoming king, that's not fair to him. If we're going to be serious about this, we have to look Mum in the eye and say, Mum, we're moving out, we've grown up, we're moving away. And not do it to Prince Charles. To say to Prince Charles that we've had your mother for 70 years, but we're not going to cop you for 5 minutes, mate, is hardly a fair go for him.
So, all right, that's interesting. If and when, I don't want to sound too crass about it, but the situation you're talking about does unfold and support then does spike for a republic, you're not exactly going to turn it down if people do use Charles's reign as a trigger point, are you?
No, we won't. And to be absolutely clear, and I need to be firm about this, I mean, Her Majesty herself was reported to say she didn't want a death watch. If you Google, I believe, remember that quote? And we're not on a death watch. We wish her a long life, and I stand to be corrected, but I think her mother lived to 104, and she looks like a terrifically healthy 93-year-old, I think she is. We wish her a long life, and what we most wish, though, is that the Australian people look at this. And one of the lines, again, I use in speeches for those who are wavering, to look to their children, to say, to imagine their niece, Esmeralda, who's 19 years old, who can aspire to be anything she wants in this world. She can want to be an astronaut, a grazier, a carpenter, the Prime Minister, whatever she wants. There's one thing brilliant Esmeralda can't aspire to as a young Australian. At the moment, as a young Australian, she can't aspire to be the Australian head of state. Why not? Because the Australian Constitution says that job's specifically reserved for a family of aristocrats in England. And in 1901, that was probably, that was okay. That was fine. Yeah, well, of course, we Australians aren't up to it. We can't run our own show. But in 2019, in 2020, 2021, 22, when we look at that and say, for national pride, for national dignity, to be able to be seen to run our own show. And I've just had a Twitter exchange with a fellow who says, look to America, you know, that's right, you know, America will get Trump. No, we won't get Trump, mate. Trump is a function of America. We will get our own person, our own eminent Australian, to be the president, or in my view, I'd rather retain the title Governor General and not change it all, because we all understand the role.
Because impossible to talk about this without the talk of the model. The Jones-Pickering model put forward to bridge the impasse between minimalists and those wanting the popular vote. This would have each state and territory, the parliament, select the candidates, and the people decide who wins. Is that the sort of thing that would engender more widespread support?
This is where we're moving into our next National Council meeting, National Executive meeting, a National Committee, where we'll be talking about precisely that. My preferred model, for what it's worth, can fit into a tweet. The current system is that the democratically elected leader of the Australian people, the Prime Minister, chooses an eminent Australian and then writes to an unelected lady living in England to ask her, would it be all right with her unelected Englishness to sign off on the decision of the democratically elected leader of the Australian people. I would like one change in the minimalist model. We stay with the Commonwealth of Australia, we stay the Governor-General, we all understand the title. The democratically elected leader chooses an eminent Australian, and then instead of asking a lady in England, asks instead the Parliament of the people, we get on with our lives. Others would prefer the direct election model, something a la Ireland, which works very, very well. We view at the moment that the ARM our job is to facilitate the discussion, to work out the democratic will of the Australian people. But I remain gobsmacked by the people who say, if we let go of Her Majesty's hand, there will be chaos, there will be carnage, we Australians can't run our own show. And I confess, I don't understand that lack of national pride to look at this and say, this could be a great unifying thing for Australia. In my Andrew Olley lecture on Friday evening, I mentioned how much I admired the approach taken by John Howard, admittedly that famous monarchist, in 1987 when he lost to Bob Hawke, and he said, I'd like to think the things that unite we Australians are greater than the things that divide us. And that was true in 1987. In 2019, I sometimes wonder. And I think that coming together on the Republic, both sides of Parliament, Tom, you've got that certain, we've got to move on in your voice. It could bring us all together, starting with you, Tom.
All right. Well, no, you read me well.
Are you with us, Tom? Are you with us? Are you with us? Are you with us, Tom?
Yeah, I'm happy to say I support a republic. There you go. I don't like revealing my opinion a lot, but there you go.
I'm just at Sky News now. Security.
Yeah, I'm ready for the emails to come in from some of my, shall we say, supporters on the viewer emails. Hey, I wanted to get a couple more topics in. Peter, you had some strong comments at the Andrew Olley lecture on press freedom. The government doesn't so far seem to be all that convinced. Are they relying on the media being unpopular, and is that going to work frustratingly well?
I quoted Thomas Jefferson, and Thomas Jefferson, the famous author of the Declaration of Independence, who went on to become the American president. He said, in a choice between a government and newspapers, I'd choose newspapers every time for holding the powerful to account. That the media, for however much it may be vilified, is actually seriously important. And I talked about the ABC, the one program of four corners on the ABC. What they've achieved is staggering in the last few years. And my final line to the government was, we ask of you, that you support independent media, you support a free media. And one other thing, any chance you could not raid the offices of the ABC and the fine journalist Annika Smethurst? I mean, raiding her home, what? The New York Times calls Australia the most secretive democracy in the world. This is Australia, the land of the fair go. Why have we got people, Australian Federal Police, pushing through the door of the home of a journalist who was doing nothing more than her brilliant job? It was outrageous.
And I might say, the government, can it still rely on the media not having widespread popularity amongst voters for all of what you said?
No, it can't. No, it cannot. I mean, this is a no-brainer. I think people look at that, and the defence of the government is this is the law, and we had nothing to do with the Federal Police going through the doors. And the answer to that is, well, change the law. And the point that I made again, that got most traction on the night, the greatest journalistic triumph of our time, Tom. although you probably weren't born, but I was Watergate. Okay, so Watergate, you had shocking government corruption. In the Nixon administration, you had two fantastic journalists and one whistleblower. They came together, they blew Watergate apart. Nixon had to resign. America was a stronger place for it. Now, under the laws that we have in this country right now, what would have happened would have been, if Nixon had had those laws, the homes of Woodward and Bernstein would have been raided, Deep Throat would have been thrown into prison to die there. In all likelihood, we never would have heard of Watergate. The essence of good governance, and I was thinking, again, I'm going into this territory that I haven't fully mapped out, but you remember the whole freedom of information laws, which I think were squired through by Gareth Evans. Am I right in that? I think probably in the late 80s, early 90s, the whole freedom of information laws. They were inconvenient to the government at the time because it gave the people the right to have information of what's happening on the inside of government. But they made for better governance. They made the place a better place.
There's a focus on them as well at the moment and how well they're being used. So we kind of veer into the broader right to know sort of aspect and campaign being run. Peter, we're nearly out of time. I wanted to ask you quickly about the book you've launched on Captain Cook. The synopsis you were giving me off air is he's not a bad man.
Well, no, Sir Michael Parkinson launched the book for me last Tuesday, or was it Tuesday before? So, there you go. Gee, they've got the thing up. Thank you. Yeah, look, I was stunned by my own level of ignorance of Captain Cook, and so on the one hand, I was stunned that in the most iconic moment of all, of where Captain Cook is about to set foot on Australian soil for the first time, his way is blocked by two Indigenous warriors with shields and with spears, and they're shouting out, "Warra, warra, 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 why? Go away, seriously go away, we're not joking, go away." Captain Cook reaches for the musket, fires between them, they still don't move, they throw baubles at them, they don't move, they don't react, they shout at them, they don't move. Captain Cook gets the musket, fires at the older man on the left, speckles him with birdshot, with small shot. How is it that in this most iconic moment, I didn't know, you didn't know, Tom, and very few people knew about that thing? Against that, Cook, in my view, was not, he didn't come to kill, he didn't come to invade, he didn't come to hurt, and he worried afterwards. I mean, there's an extraordinary quote from him in 1775, where he talks about these peoples that we visit. They could be quite excused for thinking we are invading them. It will be up to us, because we hit them with our superior firepower, etc. It will be up to us to persuade them different. I mean, my take on Cook is not a bad man, but I'm still staggered by what he did when first setting foot on Australia.
All right, well, that's a brief insight into what you might find. Look, he's been a figure of a lot of debate even within politics in the past few years, so I'm sure it'll be a fascinating read. Peter Fitzsimons, thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Bye-bye.